We are fortunate to have with us today Professor Abhijit Banerjee, the winner of this year's Nobel Prize for Economics, which he has won with Esther Duflo and Michael Kramer. Esther Duflo and Professor Banerjee have written this book, Good Economics for Hard Times. Esther Duflo also happens to be Professor Banerjee's wife. Thank you for speaking to the Quint, sir. So, speaking of hard times, how bad is the condition of the Indian economy?
I don't think anybody knows. I think there's different markers. One of them is sort of the government puts out a growth rate. Another one, the government also puts out the NSS data. Look at the NSS data. Average consumption has not gone up since 2014-15. It's gone down slightly. That's unusual. It almost never goes down. So I think there's enough reason to be concerned, even if nobody knows whether it's really bad, it's a little bit bad, or not bad at all. I think there's difference of opinion, but I think that some of the most obvious markers, like for example, the investment rate is very low, and credit offtake has been slow, and this NSS consumption, which is an independent data source, also seems to suggest, incomes are not growing. So I would say there's certainly enough evidence to make us worry.
So, in your chapter, The End of Growth, you have tried to answer the question why firms in India aren't growing to the extent that they should. Could you explain why this might be happening?
I think there might be many reasons, but one of them that one should worry about is that the financial sector it doesn't target firms that are, have a high potential. It seems like, the evidence we looked at, performance of the firm doesn't seem to influence how much credit it gets. So may also be that some of these people just don't want to grow their businesses. But I think it's an interesting puzzle that Indian firms are small and they don't really grow, meaning they start at a particular size and stay there. In the US, you see, most firms, it's an up-or-out world. Firms either grow fast or they shut down.
The financial sector, you have in fact spoken of it as one of the main culprits behind the present mess. You have written that Indian banks are famous for trying to avoid lending to anyone except blue chip borrowers. How can one set this right? What is the fix for this?
Well, there's already a bunch of fixes put in place. For example, there's a priority sector lending targets. So banks are required to lend 40% of the portfolio to the priority sector. And that's one instrument that does probably help a little. I suspect that it's also the fact that if there's default in a public sector bank, the CVC, the Central Vigilance Commission, is empowered to investigate them. That's a pretty scary thing. So if I were a bank officer, would I really want to take a lot of chances? No, because it's asking for trouble. I think the fact that these banks are regulated through this very statist apparatus is probably a problem. The CVC, people should be allowed to make mistakes. When you say that the Vigilance Commission will come and investigate any loans that have gone bad, then you're really putting the whole weight on kinds of vigilance kind of things.
Do you think is there an atmosphere of state terror that is affecting the economy?
I think it's state terror. I don't know that's going along. But I think people are worried about taking decisions. Bureaucrats seem to be a little worried about sticking their neck out.
What is your opinion, sir, on the micro-targeted interventions like PM Kisan, like Ujjwala?
Well, I think the question of PM Kisan is in some ways it's meant to be a replacement for another micro-targeted intervention, which was the use of the support prices. And I think the support prices and the fertilizer subsidy and the power subsidy are all worse ways to help the Kisan than directly giving them some cash. So in general, I'm sympathetic to this way of moving away from sort of input and output based subsidies.
So, in the book, you have said that, let's be clear, tax cuts for the wealthy do not produce economic growth. But in India, recently we had a corporate tax cut of 35% to 25%. In the US, I think the Trump administration has been quite fond of that approach. Despite there being clear evidence of it not helping, why do governments go for these kind of measures?
Well, partly because I think while the evidence is clear, it's not necessarily well known. That's part of the reason we wrote this book, to make that evidence well known. It's a lot of people believe that, it must be that taxes provide incentives and it increases the growth rate. I think it's actually striking how little evidence there is in favor of that view. But I don't think people know the evidence. And it's probably also the case that Trump is perfectly happy to, claim whatever he wants to claim, to do things he wants to do, like rewarding himself.
Staying with the Trump administration, and you've also touched upon it in the book, that they seem to be following this dichotomous policy of protectionism on one hand and then tax cuts on the other. What is it? How is it affecting the American economy? Is these measures helping in any way?
It's hard to tell because, so many things happen all at once. There's no particular reason to think they would help. I mean, in particular, the trade war with China is probably not great for many groups in the US. It's doing something, it's changing things. I suspect the tax cut made the rich richer. That's usually what Trump wants to do in any case.
So you've written in the first chapter of your book, in India and other countries, the public conversation often ends up becoming a slanging match between left and right. You seem to be caught in the crossfire ever since you've come here. You have Piyush Goyal saying things that, your vision was rejected by the people of India. You have Rahul Sinha of the BJP making quite unsavory remarks about your wife and your personal life. So, did you expect that your work would get these kind of responses? How do you respond to this?
I don't. There's no, you can't, I tend to operate under the assumption that you should expect the best of people. I don't see I'm neither able nor willing to get into slanging matches.
Obviously. You've written that economists often have to face the reality that their assumptions are very different from what the public's assumptions are. How does one deal with this? And also, according to you, what are the main ways in which the public's assumptions would be very different from yours on what issues?
So I think, how does one deal with that? One reason we wrote this book is to try to help people understand that when we say things, there's a logic and some really detailed evidence behind it. Whereas often it seems like economists are seen as being oracles. They pronounce, they say things. We're trying to partly be much more pedantic, explain why certain things work. So hopefully some people will read that and say, okay, fine, now I believe you a bit more. And then one place where I think there's a big divergence is the public actually believes that most people respond very strongly to incentives. We talked about the fact that there's very little evidence that people respond strongly to incentives. So public believe that if I'm in a poor country, I'm desperate to leave and go to a rich country. To be honest, people don't move. Even inside India, people might go to the city for a temporary job or something, work in real estate, but they go home. It's very, people are actually pretty careful before they move permanently.
But despite people's unwillingness to move, there is this sort of bogey that is created that the poor migrants are coming from Bangladesh, or in the West you have migrants who are coming from the Middle East and from Muslim countries or from Eastern Europe. So why? I mean, if people are not actually moving to the extent they are, as you are saying, or is it the case?
Yeah, so I think partly that's we try to make the point that people believe the theory more than the facts. They think people respond to incentives, so they must come here since they're poor. I think it's, and yet if you look in the US, most Americans, after they lose their jobs, don't leave where they lost their jobs, which is part of the reason why this job loss is such a big problem. Because if they had left and taken a job somewhere else, you won't have this concentration of poverty.
कांग्रेस की जो न्याय स्कीम थी, कहा जाता है कि उसमें आपने काफ़ी उन्हें मदद की थी इस स्कीम को बनाने में। आपकी भूमिका क्या थी इसमें, और जो फाइनल प्रोडक्ट निकला, क्या आप उससे इत्तेफाक रखते हैं? क्या आप उससे एग्री करते हैं?
तो मेरा भूमिका खास तौर से यही था कि उन्होंने काफ़ी इसके डिज़ाइन में कई नंबर्स की ज़रूरत था, और मुझसे पूछा गया था कि आपको पता है कि ये 20% और बॉटम 20% इसका मैक्सिमम इनकम कितना होगा, और इनमें इनके एवरेज इनकम कितना है, इस तरह के कई चीज़ें हमसे पूछा गया था, और मैंने वो डेटा निकाल के दे दिया। ख़ास इसके फाइनल डिज़ाइन में मुझसे नहीं पूछा गया, अपने आप वे लोग तय किया।
अगर मौजूदा मोदी सरकार आपकी राय मांगे कि इससे कैसे निपटा जाए और इस मंदी से कैसे निकला जाए, तो आपका क्या मशवरा रहेगा, क्या एडवाइस रहेगी?
अगर मैंने पहले तो थोड़ा सा और चर्चा करूँगा, क्योंकि मेरे यही चिंता है कि यहाँ डिमांड की कमी है, लेकिन अगर इस पे थोड़ा सा चर्चा भी करना चाहिए। अगर डिमांड की कमी है तो गरीबों के पास और पैसा पहुँचना चाहिए कि पीएम किसान में 6,000 की जगह 12,000 दिया जा सकता, ऐसा कुछ करना चाहिए।
न्याय किस्म की स्कीम चल जाएगी आपके हिसाब से?
नए के एक बहुत बड़ी प्रॉब्लम थी कि वो बॉटम 20% को वे लोग एक फिक्स्ड अमाउंट दे रहे थे, तो इसके वजह से जो 19% में है वो शायद 39% में पहुंच जाएगा, और बहुत लोग इस पे नाराज़ होने का संभावना था। तो मेरे ख्याल से अगर वे लोग ये अभी पावर में आए थे, तो वो लोग इस स्कीम को थोड़ा सा बदलना शायद जरूरी होता,
तो प्रोग्रेसिव स्केल होता था,
कुछ ऐसा करना पड़ता। वो स्कीम जैसा था वो अभी मेरे ख्याल से इम्प्लीमेंटेबल नहीं था।
Thank you, sir, for speaking to the Quint. We really hope people read your book and go through the solutions you have to offer.